thank you all for coming in this crazy weather. I didn't know how many would show up. I think our virtual audience probably grew a little bit because of the weather, but thank you all so much for coming. I'm Rachel Platt. I'm the Director of Community Engagement here at the Fraser History Museum. Welcome to tonight's program. You see behind us, Changemakers. We welcome you both in person and virtually. Those who are in person do have masks. We decided just for our ease, Omicron's dying down just a little, that it was safe for us to be up here without masks. This program is part of our Let's Talk Bridging the Divide series. We thank the Gaines Foundation for their support with this. And I think we will all agree that the folks sitting up here with me are change makers, breaking new ground, breaking barriers, and leading us into the future. The question is, do they agree with that title? We're going to be asking them about that. A change maker is someone who takes creative action to solve a problem. Someone who's doing good by showing empathy, creativity, and demonstrating collaborative leadership, and again, intention translated into action. Well, there is a lot of action by the folks who are joining us up here. It's why I reached out to them for the discussion. Now, the idea of this program came to me when I was at the ribbon cutting. She doesn't know it. The village at West Jefferson that Reverend Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson led in the Russell neighborhood. I saw you that day, and I said, if I could get you two in the same room, that would really be something, because I so admire what you all have done. And then I thought, who else would help round out this wonderful panel? And here you have them up here with me. So what a lineup. We begin with Siddiqua Reynolds, the president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. She is the first female leading that organization. She has a long list of other firsts and, of course, led the charge for the transformative track facility, the Norton Healthcare Sports and Learning Center. We all know about that. Just recently featured on ESPN. World records were broken that day. Other news coming out about other track meets that are coming up on February 25th. First anniversary, I just got the email today, and the Isley brothers for the Derby Gala, just in case you didn't know. I'm sure Siddiqua is going to plug that at some point tonight. Welcome, Reverend Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, the president and CEO of Molo Village. She led the major revitalization project, the Village at West Jefferson in the Russell neighborhood. If you're not familiar with it, $7.8 million project, 30,000 square feet of space that houses retail, restaurant, healthcare, job opportunities, just to name a few. The point when she did it, keep the money that normally flows out of Russell, keep it in Russell. Next, we have Andre Guest, the president and CEO of the Fund for the Arts. He is from Smoketown, now back in his hometown after a career that has taken him literally all over the world, including career management for top jazz performers. We're going to be talking about how and why he came back, why the opportunity to use the arts to heal our community was so appealing. He's the first African American to hold the top job with the Fund for the Arts. You will see tonight that Adria Johnson is missing, the president and CEO of Metro United Way. Wanted to let you know she just recently lost her mother. She is preparing for her funeral this weekend. We send our love. We know how proud her mother must have been of Adria. She lost her father late last year when she became the first black CEO at Metro United Way in its more than 100-year history. Her father said, go and make Louisville better, and she certainly has. We will miss her voice tonight, and I know that you all are holding her in your thoughts tonight. Finally, my former colleague at WHAS-TV, where she spent many years as an anchor and a reporter. Tonight she is here as the president of the Rotary Club of Louisville, Jean West. Hello. Good to see you. The Rotary Club, of course, all about engaging in community service. Jean becomes the first African American to lead that organization in its 110-year history. We welcome you all and want to ask that question. In that introduction, you heard me say first how many times? You're barrier breakers in so many ways. And I'm curious, and we'll go down the line, do you think about that at all? Siddiqua, let's start with you. Yes. Do you think about it too much?
No, but I think about the responsibility that comes along with that. I think about the sort of the disappointment that you still have a first African Americans doing whatever in 2022, 2020. You know, it's how far have we come, and how much further we have to go. Yeah, you think about it. I mean, and people say it, so you
talk about the weight of that, because I read different articles about people feeling the weight of that. Jamesetta, what about you? Do you think about that being first? Do you like when people say it? Does it matter to you?
It doesn't matter to me, but I do think about it because not only is it because of my role at Molo Village, but also because I am a pastor, a woman pastor that is in a Southern Baptist community where the majority of pastors are male. And so to be a pastor turned developer and then building a project such as this in this community, it is a change maker moment, but it's also, as Siddiqua said, a heavy moment because there are a lot of expectations once you begin a project, but then there's a lot of anticipation of failure in that project.
All right, Andre, how about you?
I mean, I have a tremendous amount of responsibility with my last name in this community because of the history of my family in this community. So when I was growing up, I couldn't go anywhere without that weight of what my last name meant. So yeah, I bear a responsibility to live up to that and do the best that I can. But it's interesting for me because I've had to think about this a lot in the past 8 months in this new role. But for the past 20 plus years of my career, I've actually been operating in what could be considered black space. I've been working at Jazz Lincoln Center. I worked at the August Wilson Center for African American Culture. I managed the career of jazz musicians. So the people that I dealt with on a regular basis were coming to black culture, and so I didn't have to apologize for anything. They were coming into the space that we were affording, whether they were white, black, yellow, red, or brown. So I never, it didn't, sort of occur to me that when I come into a space that is not considered to be quote unquote black space, that a lot of folks are coming into it with a certain weight and having to apologize for certain things. It was just something that the tables were turned for me for the past 20 years. So I bring that into the space that I'm in right now and trying to make a difference, not only for everybody, but for what it is that we are, because I understand what our contribution has been to culture and arts. So there's no apology inside of that, knowing I just want to set the record straight for what is true.
Interesting. How about you, Jean?
You know, Rachel, it's interesting. In my career as a journalist and reporter, there were firsts. And I didn't think about that because it was my job. You know, you get out and you do your job, sometimes as a female, and as a person of color, you had to work twice as hard, or as long as you don't think that, you know, it was the first I was part of the first female anchor team in America 100 years ago, and then broke the color ground as the first African-American anchor of the major broadcast in 2 states. But I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. I just thought about doing my job and doing it very well. However, as the president now of the Rotary Club of Louisville, I have a responsibility, and as you say, Siddiqua, you are reminded of it, on occasion, and so you can't help but think about it. And so I do have a responsibility in a way to steward this honorable, old, established organization in a direction that keeps it viable and healthy and growing. So yes, not only that, I'm only the 4th woman. So each of the female presidents has felt that weight as well. So yes and no. That makes sense.
You all have said in some form or another that you feel the weight of this. Talk to me about that weight, how you handle it, and what it feels like for people. Tell us, when you talk about this weight, is it just the weight of the responsibility of so many people depending on you? Just break it down for us a little bit.
Well, it is. It's the weight of so many people depending on you. It is the weight of any failure not being just your own, but really belonging to an entire community and feeling like you just don't have the room for error. I mean, if you could imagine me trying to build a sports complex and trying to raise, $53 million, and it's people off. I would not stop because it was me promising my people, myself, that something was going to get done. And so it is a very different level of responsibility and accountability. And then you have the pressure of white people and people in power who feel like, if you can't do, you see we tried with her. You see, and she couldn't do it. It got messed up, and now we're not going to do it anymore. We've invested this amount of money in the West End. We've invested this amount, and they haven't, and this hasn't, and so now we're not going to do it anymore. No accountability for how it got done or what happened. And like Jean says, my career, I've been the first a lot, and getting into the position, you're not thinking about being the first. I was the first black woman clerk for the Kentucky Supreme Court, but I was also a clerk in a courtroom where I was the only black person, and the only other black person who came in was a defendant in shackles and handcuffs. I can't explain to you the pain of that, of you feeling like, just the challenge of trying to walk into a space and be good enough to represent everybody who wants you to represent them, right? There are some people, we are not a monolithic community, but there is so much weight that comes from wanting to make people proud and also not wanting to mess it up for who might come after you. And I'll say this last thing, I had a situation, I walked into a Kroger, and there was a man on one of those scooters. And he started, trying to get up, and I'm like, what can I do for you? And he said, no, an older gentleman, older black man. He said, I'm standing for you. You make me so proud.
Wow.
You make me so proud. So like even Saturday when I'm walking around with my hair looking crazy, I'm like, okay, y'all, look, I'm not trying to represent everybody today. I got kids. I'm a mess. Just let it go.
And I love when you do that on social
Yeah.
media. If anybody says anything about my hair today, and I love it. So let me ask you, and then I'm going to move down the line. So when you feel that weight, I can't even imagine what that weight felt like with that track. I mean, do you lose sleep? How do you, your blood pressure, I just really wonder, you must.
Yes, lost sleep. Somebody had interviewed me recently, and they didn't run it. It was a horrible interview. But they said, what is it like to be a leader? And I said, people talk a lot about the letter Dr. King wrote in the Birmingham jail. But they don't talk about how depressed he must have been, how sad and lonely he must have been. Leadership is lonely. If you really care about what you're doing and you are making decisions that you believe are right, there are going to be days where you are the only one who thinks that. And people are happy to join the bandwagon. But it is lonely. It is tough. And building that complex, yes, I went to bed and cried many times. And especially between March and May, when every day I was threatened with not having enough cash, not having enough, this is so embarrassing to admit. But one night I literally prayed and said, God, if you are not going to allow me to finish this, I'd rather die. And I said, I have 2 kids that I adore. That is that's ridiculous, right? And I had to come out of that.
But I think, does that surprise you all to learn how lonely it is to be a leader? Yes, no, no. Some are saying no. Just the weight of that. That is incredible. Jameis said it, you were nodding your head a couple times.
I experienced a lot of the same feelings and emotions that Siddiqua has expressed. But I think the best way for me to talk about the weight of what this project is, there was a gentleman who would come every day, and he would sit on the concrete post there where the flag is at the fire station. And through the building process, I would go down there and look, and he'd be sitting there, and he'd be kind of looking like, okay. And every day he did that. And so we actually moved into the building last March 15th. And I was downstairs, and I was checking the doors, and all of a sudden I heard a knock on the door, and it was like, what is that? And he I opened the door and he said to me, "You really did it. You really did this." And so, that was a sense of pride because I am a woman of my word. And I had made that commitment to the people in our community that we were going to do this. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but it was going to get done. And so I probably put that weight on myself. But it was one that helped propel me to do what needed to be done in order to get the project completed.
How about you, Andre?
The weight, well, first, let me say something. The weight for me is different. I'm not a woman. So I want to acknowledge that in this patriarchal society we live in. So there's a different kind of weight that's associated with being black and a woman. I don't carry that weight. So let's get that out of the way first. But secondly, I signed up for this. I didn't have to do it. I wanted to do it. And any weight that I feel is a self-imposed weight because it's really to my grandparents, to my parents. And I put a lot of weight on my kids. And they have done they've shined in such a way for all the weight that I put on them. So now that they've gotten to a place that I'm really grateful to see them at, it's like now it's the other way around for me. And so the other thing that I have is I have a complete and total unconditional love support system in my family with my wife and kids that makes it easy for me to come home at night, be with my wife, FaceTime with my kids and be like, okay, this is all good, because I've seen how hard it is to be in the middle of all of this and see how they get on the other side of this. And I must also say the reason that the weight is a little different for me, it's a self-imposed weight, is because, I'm from here, but I left here. And I went into a city like New York where, color didn't mean as much as it means here in terms of being a black man in a world and dealing with it. That if you don't leave this environment as a black man, it's rough. I'm not going to lie to you. My son left home when he was 17 years old from Montclair, New Jersey, went to Boston Conservatory, went to the Royal College of Music in London, and said, I'm not coming back to the United States, let alone Louisville, Kentucky, because it's rough. And so I'm not going to lie, I would not want my son to grow up in this city. Now, I'm doing everything I can for my grandchildren to be okay to live here, but it's rough. And so if there's any weight that I put on myself, it's to actually make it so that I don't feel that way, so that somebody like me would be possible. And really the only reason I feel like I was possible is because I left.
Interesting. Which is sad for people who stay. I mean, obviously something that needs to be addressed. Jean, let's talk about that weight.
Because there's a true brain drain. My sons are the same way. They're all bright, brilliant young men, but they are in New York, Boston, and Florida, and they won't come back. Rachel, the weight I feel is, I suppose...
That might be another program. I'm just saying because,
But yours
that's
too.
shocking.
Well, then your kids too, as well, right?
Now, one
Your-
is here.
Okay.
One is here.
The weight I feel is the weight of tradition. Coming out of a pandemic, I had a lot of challenges. When I was elected, actually in 2019, it's funny. Julie Schmidt, who's the communications director for KET, was the president at the time. She was choosing her slate for officers. And she called me, I was on the board, and she said, we would like for you to consider running for president, or putting your name in for president. I was like, what, are you kidding? And she said, no, it's in Julie. Rotary's 100, she says, gee, Rotary's 100 years old, you can't break it, okay? And then she said, but so what could go wrong? And then there was COVID. Thank you, Julie. So we had, we lost our place, we went virtual, we had to work all that out, then we had to come back, and I was, and then stewarding the organization and responsible for bringing our members back in the fold, figuring out how to come back safely. I have a Rotarian over here, Barry's wonderful, he's phenomenal. So he knows what I'm talking about, finding a new place. But then we have to grow our membership or we will die. It's like every nonprofit organization, right? So I had that challenge, and our members tend to be on the elder side, so I'm tasked with bringing in young members and diverse members. So all of that and keeping the tradition. For instance, I had to think about having an event that has been a traditional place for us to have an event where I couldn't be a member. And so in trying to change minds, and it is the president's prerogative to say, no, we're not going to have it there. I would rather have it here. But then getting the pushback, but this is a tradition. They're counting on it. We need to put the deposit on it now. Well, and so you have to balance that and negotiate that and kind of fight those battles. So those kinds of things.
Did you win that battle?
I did. No. Well, I have a great team, and I had a lot of support, and I had, just by, my intent in letting the club know that I'm not going to come in and blow things up. We're going to keep the tradition, but we're going to grow and move forward. So I had that kind of support to be able to move that event to another place.
Let's talk about, first of all, would you all agree that you're all change makers? I want to get that on the record. Would everybody say yes to that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just have to get that on the record since I said I was going to ask that question. I want to drill down on each of your stories just a little bit. Siddiqua, not from here, actually born in New York, right? Mm-hmm. But landed here. Mm-hmm. And it has to be a shortened version a little bit of how you ended up here.
In Louisville, you mean?
Yeah.
My mother's best friend moved to Kentucky. We moved to Kentucky shortly after, and then I've lived in North Carolina, from the Bronx originally, South Bronx, and lived in Durham, North Carolina, Lexington, Kentucky, and Louisville. Came here for a job, and I've stayed. I was a public defender here, and had my own law practice. And I do need to say something. I think situated a little bit differently than a lot of black leaders and other leaders in this community because I run a civil rights organization. And so my role is not always so warm and fuzzy. And I have to kind of explain to people sometimes, what the job is. And so I think it is a very different kind of thing. But it is, like, I love what Andre said, I signed up for this. Now some of it, there are some pieces of it that you would never imagine or would be a part of the job description, but I agree completely with no apologies. You make no apologies, but you certainly, it is what it is. And this
one thing that you're very open about is your mom and the tragedy of her death. And how did that shape you?
Okay, so I'm trying really hard to get through this week with this, between
we can skip if
what
it's
has
too much
happened
this
with
week.
Craig and Quintez,
Right.
and my mother suffered from depression. It took her life, and so I am very much an advocate for mental health awareness. And I said this to you on the way in, that the last week David Fink and I from the Jewish Family Career Services had actually come together to write an op-ed to beg for mental health support in our community, particularly in our schools. Our children are desperate for it. There's all this talk around police and more armed officers, and there's really nothing around prevention. And the teachers need the support, they deserve it. The students need it, the administrators, everybody. So we write this thing, and then of course we know what happened later Monday. And so I think that everything in my life has helped to shape me and to make me into the person that I am and the advocate that I am. And I have found myself daily now, really for the last month or two, really, saying, and I'm not a very religious person, but I'm very spiritual, and just sort of saying, now God, here's our conversation. I'll just let y'all in on it. I can be a really good advocate without having to experience everything. You know what I mean? Trust me. So I am very good at learning from other people's pain. I am very good. I don't have to have it all. And so we, have just been talking about that. And so, it is what it is. So it's, I'm glad you asked the question and I got through it. It feels good. My mother was what every good mother, everybody thinks they have the best mother in the world. I did and do still. And it was difficult, and I believe that every valley in my life is for me to help somebody else get to their mountaintop. And what I definitely know about me is I am not built to break.
Well, that's where I don't understand the weight. I can't imagine, and not built to break, because I see you all the time, and it's like, when does your respite come? When? I don't know. We're going to get to that at some point. The track, tell me how it came to you. You woke up one night and then Usain was on TV? Is that what I read?
No. It's not exactly how it happened. I have been in enough groups of people, really. There are a lot of track coaches in this city that wanted to build a track. They wanted a mayor to build a track. They wanted somebody to build an indoor facility. And they said, Louisville's leaving all kind of money on the table. We used to have the Mason-Dixon games, and now we don't. And so I had heard all of those conversations, and so when the 24 acres was open, I bear the weight of this community. It breaks my heart when things don't go well. There was supposed to be another project. Got 24 acres of contaminated land. My office is at 15th and Broadway. This land is at 30th. And I went home and laid in bed. I was too lazy to get on my knees, and I just said, God, I can't. What can we do here? What can we do? And when I opened my eyes, Usain Bolt was on the news. And so I was reminded of all the conversations. And to be honest with you all, nobody talks about this. There's a track coach in Louisville that is now suing me. He's saying that I stole his idea. Now, this is a $53 million project. I raised $43 million, borrowed $10 million. My name is on the loan. I've raised now another $4 million, still got $6 million left. He still hasn't given 53 cents. But we're going to court. And I told the other track coaches, I said, you know I'm being sued. And they said, we all should have sued you. It was everybody's idea. And I'm like, okay, don't, but the point is, and that's what I told her. I said, you need to come to court and say that. And that's true. It's like, there's no good deed. And you think about the sacrifices, but the reality is, I could not work 5 minutes away from 24 acres of contamination in the community that I love. We don't deserve that. We don't, and it's worth whatever the fight has to be.
Well, when I saw it on ESPN, kudos.
Thank you.
Kudos. Just amazing stuff. All right, Jamesetta, let's talk from Louisville.
From Louisville.
And what led you to be a pastor?
It wasn't by choice.
Okay, there's a story there.
Not by choice. But I grew up in Beecher Terrace, and the church that I actually pastored was invisible to us because it was a closed community. It was German evangelical, and people that looked like me were not allowed to be there. But God called me to pastor that church, and when I went there, me and accepted me into the community. And then the hard work began, changing and evangelizing and reaching out to the residents of Beecher Terrace. And as the church began to grow and we began to do mission, we started having environmental challenges in the church: plaster falling, lead paint, we had molding, we had all type of issues. And so we ended up relocating to a strip mall about a mile away so that we could figure out what to do with the property. And in the meantime, I was a part of Bingham Fellows and One West, and the project was re-imaging west of 9th Street. And part of that process meant trying to figure out what resources the people needed in the Russell community. And I was fortunate enough, along with B.J. Atkins, to be co-leader of the People's Task Force for the transformation grant that Louisville received. And so they gave us an opportunity to see what was lacking in our community. And so as a result of that information, we decided to take that property and to subdivide it and to build the village at West Jefferson Street. We knew that there were no family restaurants in Russell. We knew that there was a lack of child learning facilities. We knew that there was not any training, job training. We knew that about $95 million was flowing outside of the Russell community annually. And so we understood all of those statistics and decided what is it that we needed to do in order to bring that economic income back into our community, but also begin to help heal the residents in our community. And so I guess what I'm saying is it started out one way. It started out because of what we needed in the church in order to renovate the church. But God had a different plan in mind. And in the meantime, it moved into economic development. It moved into advocacy for our community. It moved into beginning to understand what it took, what it takes in order to be able to be whole as an individual and as a family in the Russell community, and then the West End are in Louisville, period. And so then we became more intentional in what we needed to bring into that project in order to make a difference. We had a whole lot of predatory type businesses that wanted to move into our building, but what we wanted was missional aligned businesses that would come in, and they were interested in doing the same thing that we were doing, and that is to help the people of the Russell community.
Well, congrats. It's absolutely beautiful. Andre, let's talk to you from Smoketown. And reading about you, I had no idea originally, potentially a medical doctor?
I mean, that's what happens when you're good at math and science. They tell you you should be a doctor.
You actually studied for some of that, right? And then
I was admitted to a 6-year medical program in Boston University out of high school.
Wow. So where did it turn?
Well, I got up there and realized very quickly I didn't want to be a doctor. And one of the things, interestingly enough, is that every person in that program, except for me, went to a very expensive prep school. And so the interesting thing enough, I love Jefferson County Schools, but Jefferson County Schools did not prepare me for that program in the way that it actually was, right? I went to Mail, we didn't have an AP program, and I did the best that I could, but I got up there and I was like, damn, this ain't no joke. So I was like, I came home, decided to major in economics because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was very good at math. Someone told me for these actuarial exams, I don't know if you all know what an actuary is. It's basically a math geek for insurance companies. Figure out when you're going to die so they can make money off of you. But they said if you pass one of those exams, which are really hard to pass, that you guarantee yourself a job. So I can do that. So I'm out in actuarial math, passed one of the exams, got a job at Capitol Holding. Hated it. I was like, I got to get out of here. So Dr. Sam Robinson at the Lincoln Foundation, I went through Lincoln Foundation programs when I was a kid. Somebody told me that his administrative assistant was leaving. So I went up and visited Dr. Robinson at it's like, was it 3rd and Broadway, which is now the St. Francis School. I said, hey, Dr. Robinson, how you doing? I understand you got a little opening over here. He said, yeah, but why are you asking me? He said, you overqualified for that. I said, I don't care. I want to hear what you got going on. So he told me, I said, I want the job. He says, really? I said, yeah, I want the job. He said, well, if you want it, it's yours. So I went back to work and quit. Went home to my wife. She's nodding her head right now. Went home and told Cheryl, I was like, I quit my job. I'm going to work for the Lincoln Foundation. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be Dr. Robbins' administrative assistant. How much money are you going to make? Well, I didn't ask him that. So I literally took the job on faith. I had no idea how much money I was making. I just knew I had to get out of there. Because at the time, I wanted my life's work to mean something more than my paycheck. I could have gotten rich staying there and passing all those exams. Didn't make me feel good. I had to get out of there. So I worked at Capital Holding, Providian, and then left, went to the Lincoln Foundation, and then I met Wynton Marsalis in 1993. And I met him after a concert in October 93. My son's name is Wynton, but my son is named after the guy that Wynton's named after. His name is Wynton Kelly. Stone guess. Wynton Kelly played piano in the Miles Davis band of Kind of Blue album. He plays Freddie Freedover. But my son was born in June. I met Wynton in October. Well, what's interesting, when I named my son Wynton, I knew I was going to meet Wynton Marsalis. And when I met Wynton Marsalis, I said, hey, are you named after Wynton Kelly? He says, yeah, how you know? Yeah. He's like, first of all, he's like, how somebody your age know anything about that? Because if you're, I guess I was 28 at the time. You're a 28-year-old, you ain't supposed to know about who Miles Davis and Wynton Kelly was. So he says, come back after the show, and we'll talk. So I go down to the orchestra pit because it was a dance show. It was the Garth Fagan Dance Company, and they were in the orchestra pit. So I went to get his autograph after the show. While I'm getting his autograph, his sound man is hitting on my wife in the back of the theater. So, if anybody knows Wynton, he's signing autographs, kissing babies, doing drops for WFPL, and the whole nine. So we end up going back to the Seelbach with his sound man and hanging out and having dinner. And so Wynton comes into to the Seelbach after, like an hour after that. So we're in there having dinner, and he goes, "You're the guy who's got the kid named Wynton Kelly." I said, "Yeah." So we sit down, we start talking, and then about 10 minutes into our discussion, I can't remember what it is, but he said something that I completely and totally, vehemently disagreed with. So I sat there for a second, and I was like, am I going to say something to him? I mean, he is Wynton Marsalis, so if anybody who knows me knows, I was like, and these are that's some of the dumbest pss, pss, pss that I ever heard in my life, and we went at it. And we argued straight for 20 minutes. And then after that, he said, man, I like you. Here's my number. We're going to keep in contact. And, then I guess about 6 months later, I called him and asked him to do a benefit concert for the Lincoln Foundation. A year and a half later, he did, because it took that long to get on his calendar. And then in 1998, I went to see him in Nashville. They had a show, because anytime he was in the 200-mile radius, I'd drive to see him. And he told me they had just been awarded what is now the Jazz and Lincoln Center's building in Columbus Circle. He said, man, we just got awarded this thing. He says, you got to come to New York. You got to come and be a part of this. I said, yeah, okay. Fast forward a year later, 1999, I'm in New York celebrating my friend's 30th birthday. I call his assistant and I get tickets to the show. Wynton's not around. This is, pre-cell phone days. He's not, so I couldn't get a hold of him. And so I go to the show. After the show, and I'm not lying, this is not hyperbole, I literally bumped into him on the street, on the corner of 65th and Broadway. And he's like, Dre? He said, what you doing here? I said, I just went to the show. Jen got me tickets. He said, why didn't you call me? I said, I did call you. You didn't pick up. He said, what you doing? I said, I'm about to go back to the hotel. Come with me. Takes me up to the Kaplan Penthouse at Lincoln Center's campus. They were having an after-the-show concert for this Duke in Small Doses concert, because it was the centennial year for Duke Ellington, 1999. Takes me up to the chairman of the board, and he says, this is Andre Guest. He's a bad MF. We need to hire him. Takes me to the executive director. This is Andre Guest. He's a bad MF. We need to hire him. 4 months later, I was in New York.
Well, let's talk, no, because, I mean, took you all over the world with the music
Yeah.
business and all of that kind of thing. How on earth did you get back to Louisville then, back to nonprofit, and now at Fund for the Arts?
She made me come.
Okay.
I
You
mean,
moved back, and you had no intention of moving
no, I
back.
didn't want. I came back here kicking and screaming, because I had the big head. I've been flying. I'm all over the world. Louisville can't hold me. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing my thing. And so when we got to Pittsburgh, because I ran the August Wilson Center, I was the CEO there for 2 years. I had a 2-year contract, and I was like, why in the world would I go back inside? Because I left Jazz and Lincoln Center, started my own company, and was doing consulting work with with arts organizations all over the world, and we were also managing world-class jazz musicians. We're traveling all around the world with them. So then I got this sort of second or third once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be there, so I went to Pittsburgh. And then our daughter, and I'm very transparent about this as you are, our daughter, anxiety and depression, tried to commit suicide in Pittsburgh. She's now a speech-language pathologist, finished a master's degree that her mother never finished because she moved to New York and raised them in Houston now, and has done great. She's a great advocate. Started an awards program at the University of Kentucky called Still We Rise, where they give scholarships to students who are suffering in silence, and advocates for mental health and for sexual assault, because not only did she suffer from depression, anxiety and depression, but she was sexually assaulted on the campus of the University of Kentucky, and made them change their actual policy about having mental health counselors in dormitories because of all the experiences that she had there. But that's a whole other story.
But that's what brought you back
Yes.
here. She's a change maker too.
Yes.
We'll just go ahead and point that out. But when you came back, then the Fund for the Arts came, and somebody sent it to you.
Yes.
What led you? There was something in that description about healing that spoke to you.
Well, what happened is I came back in 2012 and basically hid for 8 years. And the only reason it was palatable for me at the time, because I was traveling 150 days a year. So I was in Paris, Amsterdam, Japan, whatever. I slept here and walked to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's every now once in a while. And I had convinced Cheryl that we were going to move to New Orleans in 2021 when our youngest daughter graduated from Berea College. Then the pandemic happened. Then Breonna Taylor happened. Then George Floyd happened. And we looked at each other like, we can't leave. And then I felt bad for the same reasons that everybody else in this room and everybody watching this felt bad. But I felt bad for a completely different reason, because my arrogant behind had turned his back on his community, where my grandmother and my grandfather gave so much. My parents, my uncles, my whole family, Cheryl's whole family's here. It's like, this community made you who you were. Dr. Sam Robinson, Ben Richmond. I mean, I went through Leadership Louisville when I was 32 years old because of Sam Robinson. I was in 40 under 40 when I was 29 years old because of Sam Robinson. And I take all of that and I want to run. And you see this happening to your city. You see your city burning around you. It's like, man, I got to do something. So, like you, but I did get on my knees.
You were not lazy.
So I got on my knees and I said, God, we're going to stay. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I need to do something. And I wasn't looking for a job. My consulting thing to pick back up, we were doing our thing. And someone sent me, Providence, Tina Whitlock, sent me in LinkedIn, which I never go to. But for some reason or another, I was led to LinkedIn that day, got the job description. I read it. 2 things stood out to me. They started the equity work in 2017. It wasn't a reaction to what happened with Breonna Taylor. If they had just started in 2020, we wouldn't be talking right now as a game changer from the Fund for the Arts. Number 2, it was if that job description had been written for my experience. So I had to leave here, get all of the world experience in the arts, and understand one thing that's truly fundamental, that art is one of the most fundamental expressions of the human condition. 2, you can't plant a white supremacist flag in the soil of the arts. It won't stand. But you can hang one off of the wall or the side of the wall of an institution. And so when you understand the juxtaposition of those 2 things and what the arts actually means, then we can create a sense of belonging in this community using arts as one of the anchors, because if you want to create belonging, you can't start from the city and go in. You have to go from the individual and go out. And one of the things that I saw that in my lifetime, the only time I've seen true sense of belonging in this community was during Ali's funeral. And you know why? It's because black folks didn't have to ask permission to opt in. And when you have that, he belonged to us. But every other person in the community thought that he belonged to them too, because he does. And when you have something like that, allows you to see yourself inside of them, and it doesn't matter what you look like in order to opt into it, and there's not some gatekeeper in front of it keeping you from it, then you can actually use that to belong. And that's what we're going to do with the arts in this community. Starting concentrically with the person, moving out to the family, going out to the neighborhoods, then going out to the public square arts institutions that are there to serve the individual, the family, and the community, and then to the city.
Jean, let's go right to you next. Let's talk about when,
It's powerful, powerful.
you saw Andre now, it's your turn. It's your turn. When you went in with the Rotary, because we know how you got there, you were recruited to be the president, right? It sounds like with that phone call.
Yeah.
Did you go in expecting to make change? What
No.
was your thought process?
I had no idea. Well, it was before COVID, it was a different world. I expected to follow, you have a year as president-elect, which is kind of a year of mentoring and training, et cetera, and you kind of get the Rotary has many levels. There's district, regional, national, international, and all that. So you're introduced to that with sessions and classes and stuff, and then you move into the president's role, and you moderate the meetings, you preside over the meetings and committees, and kind of keep things in like they are, and then everything blew up. So no, I wasn't expecting to make change. I was hoping to have the organization grow in a positive way so that it can be around for another 100 years.
Any programs that you did that you were especially meaningful to you that you brought in? Because I've been looking at the topics that you all are doing. They're fantastic.
I have to tell you, it's been, again, a good team, a great speakers committee, and one of my charges was, I want the platform to reflect the community. Andre has been a speaker, Siddiqua has been a speaker. We have had some very powerful, diverse speakers that have really enlightened our members. I think every meeting, and the other charge was that I wanted my members to learn something from every meeting, to leave there with a pearl of something. Service above self is the Rotary motto. So all of our speakers, I want them to speak to that, to how do you serve your community in your role as CEO or volunteer or mayor or et cetera. So yeah, I was hoping to broaden our vision.
One thing I want to do, a couple rapid fire things. I want to make sure I leave some time at the end for questions. What characteristic do you think that you have or think others should have to be a change maker? Just real quickly down the line. Siddiqua? Courage.
Perseverance.
Creativity.
Patience.
All different. Those were really good. All right, now we're going to do something fun here. I asked you all to send me in pictures of you all when you were younger. And because it always is important to me to see who you are now, look at your younger self, and the best piece of advice you would give that younger self. So we'll see this little firecracker. Turn around that way. What piece of advice would you give to that little girl?
It's a good question. Was I supposed to have this ready?
No.
Oh, okay.
What did you think I want your baby picture for?
I would say to her, trust your gut. trust your gut. It will just never lead you wrong. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. I love that. What were you doing in this picture?
Kung fu fighting. It was my, you know that song, everybody was kung fu fighting? Yeah, yeah. That was my all-time favorite song as a child. And my mother, who adored me, would force my whole family to sit down and watch it. So my grandmother is sitting behind me, my aunts, and everybody's trying to smile, but really they were so sick of this song that I sang every time. But
I
it was
love that.
kung
Love
fu
that. All right. Look at Jay Masetta. Is that not the most beautiful little picture? I love that. All right, Jay Masetta, piece of advice.
Have love and compassion for people.
Your eyes sure do.
Yeah.
Your eyes just struck me in that picture. And look at your current day. I mean, the eyes are just right there, right? I love that. I know. Am I the only one? I thought she looks the same, right? Doesn't she? All right.
Well, first thing I'd tell him how to figure out to keep that hair. Take better care of it or something, whatever that might be. But, I was, as I told you, I was a math and science geek, so it's like when you're really smart, they push you towards that sort of thing. I wish, if I'd go back to tell him right now, I'd tell him to play the piano.
Really?
Yeah, to play the piano.
Play the piano.
Take
Okay,
piano
sure.
lessons.
Okay. I wanted to keep Adria's in just because I love that picture with her brothers. And she said, will you please keep my brothers in if you show it? So yes, absolutely. So I wanted to show that. All right, Miss Jean West.
Oh, God. Yeah, the boy you have that crush on, he was not worth it, so. Forget about it.
Which translates into trust your gut.
Oh, the interconnectedness I'm seeing up here. I love that.
I would say it's okay to be a late bloomer, and I was, and I stressed about that. My friends matured faster, they got boyfriends faster, blah, 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 got married early and all that. And it's okay to take your time and go at your own pace. And life happens while you're making plans.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that?
There you
One
go.
more question
Yeah.
from me, then we're going to open it up to the audience. How would you answer this question? I will consider myself a success if I'll start with Jean. Siddiqua made me. I'm teasing.
If my children understand what my passion is and what and have been, and somehow let me know that.
Andre?
Give it my all every day.
Jane said it?
Just being a servant leader. That's all I have ever wanted to do is to serve.
Siddiqua?
If my children are happy.
If your children are happy, in case you didn't hear. Do you all have any questions? If you do, there's a microphone back there. I would love for you all to get up and go to the microphone. Don't be shy. Somebody's got to have a question. Anybody? Huh?
We answered
Somebody's got one.
Oh, good. Come on
Can I
down.
say something about what Andre said?
Absolutely, yes. While he's making his way down, go ahead.
I just
What'd I say,
love, what I love about you, and especially on this panel, and I hope you do it always, is to talk about how smart you are in your education, because so often we dumb ourselves down to not make other people feel uncomfortable, or there is this assumption that you are in the arts or you run a nonprofit, and so that's just the job you could get, as if you didn't have a million options. And we all have
Yeah.
chosen, we all made these choices, and I think that is so important to say, and I just thank you so much for just being so clear about that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
First, I just want to thank everyone for their time this evening. It's an inspiration to hear your stories. Personally, it's tremendous motivation to see all the work that you have done to improve the city. Question I had for you all is, as you think about the future for our city of Louisville, we talked a lot about the weight, we talked a lot about the burden, but can you talk about something that gives you a sense of optimism and hope as you think about the upcoming year?
You must have seen my script, my last. I see you. Okay. What gives you hope? Where do you see hope and optimism in Louisville? Because it's been a tough
Yeah.
2 years. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I mean, it's the reason I signed up for the job in the arts. It's like I've dedicated the last 20 some odd years of my life in the uplift of culture, but specifically black culture, because I understand that American culture is black culture and black culture is American culture. And the hope that I have is what I said to you before in terms of you can't plant a flag of white supremacy. So what is going to help us come together in this fractured city is an understanding of that. And that's what gives me hope. We got a lot of work to do, but I wouldn't wake up every day and do what I'm doing if I didn't believe that it were possible. And I say this all the time. It's very, very rare in life that you get an opportunity to wake up every day and systemically move the needle on something you care about. Most of the times we all just will sit back and complain about what's not happening. So I say the world of what not is infinitely larger than the world of what is. Let's deal with the world of what is and move that is forward and care less about what's not, but only deal with what's not in terms of what it needs to be in order to be what is.
All right. Jean, one thing that gives you hope.
I think the events over the last couple of years has it awakened us, however you feel about it, whatever the divide may be. You can't help but have noticed that there has been a change in a paradigm. And I think, I'm hoping that the exposure of the differences that we have, the things that we have in common can bring us together. The more we know, the better we are. And the more that we can expose each other to our cultures. For instance, in Rotary, I give them a Cajun culture class. It's not just about race, it's about cultures too. I'm from Louisiana, I grew up. So we have our own strange, weird culture. That's why the boots. Mardi Gras, y'all know this. Mardi Gras has started, people. So, yeah, that's right. Yeah. If you were in New Orleans, you all would be wearing beads and you'd be dancing and all this right now in this meeting. So, I think and I can see the joy on their faces when I give them a quiz and they know the answer or they don't know their answer and I tell them the answer and they're like, oh, okay. So just exposure, just learning, just open yourself. And I think this city, I think we were forced to do that. And as long as we take advantage of it positively, I think we're in good shape.
Jamesetta, one thing that gives you hope.
The amount of interest and investment and just social capital that we have in the West End now. When I first started this project, and I would talk to different people from around the city, they'd say, we've already invested in this, so why are we going to do it again? We don't want to come west of 9th Street. The people don't really want this. And so I find hope that there are people now in this city that are interested in making an investment in West Louisville, and it's not just a one-off. I pray it's not a one-off, but that means that we have to continue to keep it in front of people. We have to continue to challenge and be awakening of the needs in our community. But I'm hopeful, but it also means that we just have to continue to press our way. We can't stop.
Amen.
Siddiqua?
Well, on Saturday, we had this wonderful, track meet on land that was contaminated. We brought people from all over the world, Jamaica, Bahamas. It was amazing to hear the racers, countries be announced as they got ready to run. And we did that in one of the poorest zip codes with the lowest life expectancy, and the community was there to witness it and watch it. And in this community, in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of social unrest, we raised, now at $47 million to build in the West End. And one thing that I tell people, this building that we're in, it is a hope building. You're not allowed to fight in this space, because in that space, in the middle of a war, and that's how it felt to me over these last couple of years, Black people and white people help build that space.
Amen.
Rich people and poor people, and I mean, like, rich people wrote a check for $1 million in some cases. The Gaines Foundation supported us, wrote a check. And a woman in the West End who won the lottery, $500, stopped on the way home and dropped off $100 at the Urban League. And a woman in the West End laying in a hospital bed pledged $5. So it took everybody. It took everybody. So even literally, I'm not kidding to you all, when we were building, I would get up when I couldn't sleep and I was stressed at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 12 o'clock, whatever, in night, morning, and I would go stand on the land, just to inspire myself. And so now to be able to walk into that space that I know it took all of these different types of people to build, it is so inspirational for me. And to see young people, see people who look like them in their community, or to see people who don't. And this, I know this is a lot, but I have to tell you, the first day that we opened, the first meet was Bellarmine, Notre Dame, somebody else, 4 schools, U of L, I can't remember the fourth. But so I'm driving up to the facility, and there are 5 white guys with no shirts on running down 30th Street, Notre Dame runners. I talk about race there because there are people who said, don't go do anything past night. Nobody's gonna come, people are scared. And I kept saying, people everywhere else don't know Louisville's narrative. People, moms and dads and grandparents go where their children are. And so for the rest of my life, whatever else people say about me, I helped clean 24 acres of contamination in a city, in a community that felt left behind. So the other joy, and this is the sick part of me, I don't mind the lawsuits. I don't mind the hate, because I went to law school because I like fighting. So it brings me joy.
Well, your direct quote, you were not built to break. So we'll be quoting you on that. Anybody else have any questions? Everybody good? I want to make sure, Greg, if you don't mind just getting a couple pictures of this panel before they disperse. I want to make sure that we get pictures of them because it's Powerhouse. I do want to promote one other program that is coming up. We've got the best of the best tonight, but we also have one coming up on March 22nd with sculptor Ed Hamilton. We have a partnership with Bellarmine. We're doing his life here, and they're doing the kickoff to their Veritas series about his craft. So if you know Ed, you know he is an American treasure, to say the least. So we'd love to have more information. You can find it on our website. I can't thank you all enough for coming tonight, being change makers in our community, and we can't wait to see what you all do next. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
You all for coming.
Now, is somebody gonna get wine between?
Next
when we
time, I
start?
invite Siddiqua to a